Hello, everybody. So, in one of the questions at the end of the funding formula project, we looked at building funds in schools. And the reason that I put the building fund on there is to let you know that schools do receive millage for the building fund, but when you looked at the schools, you could see that the millages were very low compared to the cost of actually building a building today. And so that serves as kind of a transition into the next big topic we're going to cover, and that is bond issues. And so in this, we're going to look at bond issues, what they are, how they work, and how we determine the increase that's necessary in local tax rates to cover bond issues. And in the end, we'll learn how to take a home and figure the cost of passing a bond issue to taxpayers depending on how much their home is worth. And in addition to that, we'll look at the assignment for covering bond issues. So let us begin with talking about types of bonds. When it comes to education, we're really talking about two types. Even though I'm going to put three up here, we're really talking two. And the most common one is buildings, actually building buildings. But the second is transportation. A third on here that I have a may revise equipment. But typically what we see sometimes when equipment, especially computer equipment, is needed in Oklahoma, we put that as part of the building piece of the bond. And so it says you cannot mix on the same issue. Basically what we're talking about here is you cannot mix building and transportation bonds. That's why when you see schools pass bond issues or put bond issues up for a vote, you typically see them in pairs, a building bond and transportation bond. Because by law, we can't mix those by Oklahoma law. So some stipulations on bond issues, the lengths that the bonds are used. Transportation bonds are used for up to 5 years max, which makes sense. We're purchasing buses using transportation bonds. A typical bus is probably going to be between $80,000 and $100,000 now, and so you're not going to get more than 5 years use out of a bus, and so therefore you will need to replace them. And so that's why we see districts, especially larger districts, on rotating schedules where they're replacing them every year. Building bonds are a little bit different. They can go up to 25 years, and we get into that a little bit later on, maybe if we have time here and it comes up. But a normal bond can go up to 25 years for building. And then equipment, it just depends on the life expectancy of whatever equipment you're using. And typically we see them up to 5 years. A little bit more on stipulation of bonds. Total issues cannot be more than 10% of the total net assessed valuation of a district. That's important to keep in mind. That's what we call the bonding capacity. So if your district is worth $10 million, then your bonding capacity in any given year is only $1 million. And so we're going to look at that because, again, that's an important thing to keep in mind, is what the bonding capacity is. And it's 10% of your total net valuation. Passage of a bond requires a supermajority. In other words, 60% of the vote is required. And I've been in a very small district where they count literally every vote. I mean, everybody counts every vote. But in this particular district, it was so small they pretty much knew everybody who voted, and they had 59.9% of passing a bond issue. They had not passed a bond issue in a number of years. and the last time they tried was this was a couple years ago, so probably 4 years prior to that, and it fell 59.9%. So it has to be a supermajority, and those are not rounded up. Collection of a bond goes into what we call a sinking fund. When we looked at the school funding, we typically did not get into the types of funds, but all the monies that we saw in the school funding project go into your general fund. That's going to be your largest of all the funds, and the one most used. You have a child nutrition fund as well that you use to pay for child nutrition and school lunches and things that entail school lunches. Districts also have what they call a sinking fund, and a sinking fund is a special place where you deposit monies dealing with bond issues. Okay, and you create a sinking fund when you pass bonds, and all the money collected that goes toward those bonds go into that sinking fund, and interest and ultimately the principal are paid out of the sinking fund. Interest on bonds are paid every 6 months. The principal of the bond is paid at its maturity, whether it's a 3-year or 5-year. And bonds are by far one of the safest ways to make money. Unfortunately, it's not a lot of money right now because the interest rate on bonds is so low, but you're guaranteed that you're going to get that money. And you just go down and get it every 6 months, and then at the end you can go and cash your bond in and retrieve the principal. So how do bonds work? Once passed, the board sells the bonds to a financial institution, and we're just going to get real general here so you get an idea. They pay for items with the bonds, and some specifics here. Items that are paid through bonds. So let's say we have $1 million worth of bonds. Those bonds are sold in $5,000 increments. The things that are paid for through those bond funds, the district leaders have to pay 70% of the items that they advertised in the election through those bond funds, and any specific project has to be completed 85% using bond funds. And money, of course, then would be distributed differently depending on the type of project that you're using. And of course, we collect taxes through increasing millage rates to pay for the bonds and the interest that goes toward those bonds. So that's basically a general idea of how they work. Key things here is that once they pass, 70% of the items promised during the election of the bond have to be completed. And of the specific projects within that 70%, 85% of each specific project has to be completed. So as I said, they are bonds are sold in denominations of $5,000. You can go down and give $5,000 and get a bond. It matures at the end of the term, but the interest is paid every 6 months. This is non-taxable income, and so therefore it is a very safe investment. Okay, and again, the downfall is that unless you have a lot of $5,000 payments or $5,000 bills sitting around, the interest just is not a lot, but it is some. It is some. So again, we have talked about what a mill is. We know that a mill is 1/10 of a penny. It is 1/1000th of a dollar, or as we more commonly know it now, is 0.001. They actually used to print mills. Here are a couple. This is a cardboard version of a mill. These were used for old age assistance. Here is one example of a metal mill. I don't know what this is made of, but it was made out of metal. Obviously, if we're talking about getting rid of pennies now, off and on, we're certainly not going to keep around mills that are worth only a tenth of a penny. Here's another example. This is a 5 mil token. And one last one. This is yet another 5 mil token. So just keep in mind, even though you don't see them anymore, we did used to actually have literally mils, tenths of a penny. So how does this work then, kind of? So this is, again, the basic concept behind a bond, and you're going to get a good general idea of how bonds work. So let's say, for the sake of numbers, that our district has an assessed ad valorem of $10 million. I like nice round numbers. So $10 million. We're going to have a growth rate of 5% per year. And we're going to have an interest rate on a bond of 4%. So if we wanted to pass a bond, then our bonding capacity would be $1 million because it's 1/10 or 10% of your total ad valorem. So we could pass $1 million. But let's say that for our district, we're going to pass a 3-year bond for $250,000. The interest on our bond is going to be the principal times the rate times time. Okay, and the time here is in years, how many years the bond will last. So what we have to do is determine our principal on our bond is $250,000. We need to determine the interest, and then we can go and determine, once we get that, how much we need to collect from our taxpayers. So the total amount of money the district will need in the property for this bond would be our original principal of $250,000 plus 3 years of interest. And we said a while ago, our interest is principal times rate times time. So we know our principal of $250,000 times our rate of 4% times time in years of 3 years. Our interest equals $30,000. So in order to pay this complete bond at the end of 3 years, we need a total of $280,000. So the $280,000 then will be collected over the 3-year life of this bond. The life of any bond, but in this case it's 3 years, so 3 years life. So in other words, we need $93,333.33 each year. So we just take the total principal plus interest divided by the time to know how much we need to collect each year. And so what we can see here quickly then is we are collecting $10,000 in interest and $83,333.33 in principal. So now our question is, well, how do we collect this? If we know we have to collect this to pay for this $250,000 bond, how does the school collect this? Well, in order to collect this, we have to set the millage rate for our district. And here's how that works. Okay, so pay attention here. You'll want to come back and watch this part because this is the part that some people get confused on. Now, we talked about the bonding capacity in our district being a tenth of what our total net valuation was. But when we set the millage rate, we go back to our total net valuation. So we're going to divide how much money we need to collect each year, $93,333.33, by our total net valuation of $10 million. And that comes out to 0.0093. Well, if we know our mills, when we look at that, we see that that's the same as 9.33 mills. Okay, so for the first year of our bond, we need to collect 9.33 mils in tax. So what does that mean? Well, let's move on. The second year, we have a growth rate of 5%. So now the ad valorem in the district, instead of $10 million, is worth $10.5 million. So now for the second year, what we need to do, and we're making the assumption that our growth rate was a steady 5%. For the second year, we need to take our $93,333.33 that we need to collect the second year and divide by our new total net valuation of $10,500,000. I have an extra zero in there. And it comes out to 8.89 or 0.00889 or 8.89 mils. So our mils have gone down a little bit because the total valuation of our district has gone up. And so the same is with the third year. If we add another 5% to the $10.5 million, we come out to our net valuation of $11,025,000. Therefore, our millage for collection in the third year would be 0.00847 or 8.47 mils. So we take all of this then, and we're going to take a nice round number, a person who has a home valued at $100,000, and we're going to see how much this person would pay for this bond issue. Just like in our bonding capacity, when we're looking at rate for the home, we're going to take 11%. Just follow me on this, the same idea. We're going to take away $1,000 for a homestead exemption, and so now we have 10%. So basically, our person who owns a home of $100,000 is going to pay on 10% of that value. So if the home were $200,000, then we'd still take away the $1,000 homestead exemption, and we would pay on that. Okay, but we see here a person with a $100,000 home with a homestead exemption is going to be taxed on $10,000. That's what he's taxed on. And so what we mean by taxed now is we're going to do a special tax for the bond issue. And we said that the first year we had to collect 9.33 mils or 0.00933 of that $10,000. And it's going to come out to $93.30. Okay, we can divide that by 12 months, and we see that this person will be paying $7.78 a month to fund our $250,000 3-year bond issue. The second year, our millage rate went down just slightly because we had an increase in total ad valorem, and so therefore our person's tax burden went down slightly. And the same for the third year. Okay, you can see that our millage rate went down again, and therefore the person's taxes went down as well. So that is basically how the process works. Okay, it's pretty straightforward. You're going to have to go back and probably review parts of this here and there to get an idea. But that's how it works when schools determine how they're going to pass a bond issue. You need to determine the interest on that bond, and then how much needs to be collected each year, including the total interest and principal for that year, and then set your millage rate based on your total district valuation for that year. And then you go to a person's home and you take 11% of their home value, take away $1,000 for a homestead exemption in Oklahoma, and this is what their property taxes are based on, is this basically in our case here a 10% assessment value. Now, I will add here before we move to looking at what the project is that keep in mind one of the questions about Oklahoma is that we have such low uh, property tax rates here. In Texas, now I don't know what property taxes actually are, but in Texas they can actually go up to the whole value of the home. So property taxes are extremely great in Texas. Um, but they're offset by other things because there is no state tax in Texas, whereas we do have a state tax in Oklahoma. So um, hopefully one of the things you're going to learn at the end of this course is that there's a lot of give and take in the tax world and finding something that matches, or the funding world. Taxes being one of that. Finding a match here or there is not the easiest thing. So let's look now at your assignment for this project, your bond issue project, and we're going back to looking at the schools that we have been studying up to this point, and these are real schools, okay? Uh, so let's just look through here, and I'm going to explain this and show you examples of how I would organize this, but you can do it however you want. So first of all, under our directions, this project has multiple answers. The goal is to identify how school bonds work and how they impact taxpayers. You will create two answer sheets for this project, one using data from Coral Sea and the other using data from Devon Crossing. If you cannot complete all the needs, desires, and plans of the district, do what you can. Indicate that you could not complete all and explain your choice of why you could not do so and why you chose to complete what you did. So, these are real districts, and what I want you to see here is how in these districts it state funding impacts a lot. We've looked at that. But I also want you to see the bonding issue also impacts districts. So Coral Sea is based on Cave Springs, which is a school down in southeastern Oklahoma. It's a very rural school. Relies very heavily on state aid, as you saw. Their net valuation for the district is $1,780,225.33. It is a very poor district. On the other hand, we have Devon Crossing. Devon Crossing is Deer Creek Public Schools, north of Edmond. And you can see their net valuation is $289,262,738. By all comparisons, Coral Sea could be considered a poor district, and Devon Crossing or Deer Creek would be considered a wealthy district. And so you're going to see it's easier for Devon Crossing to do the things that you're going to do. So here's what you're going to do. First of all, you need to have these assumptions in mind. There is a steady ad valorem growth of 4% over 10 years. The interest rate on all bonds, whatever you pass, is 3%. All bonds that you put out are going to pass, and all the fees within these bonds are included. So here are the needs, wants, and desires. How did we phrase it up here? Needs, desires, and plans of the district. So again, you're going to do this for each of them. You're going to do one for Devon Crossing and one for Coral Sea. My first thought would be to do Devon Crossing first, and that's simply because you're going to realize that they have such bonding capacity that it's going to make it very easy for you to get it done. Okay, I'm just telling you up front. So here are the 5 things you need to try to do. Pass 2 different transportation bonds, each for $250,000. You need to renovate an old building that will become 10 additional classrooms for the high school and will cost $10 million. You need a classroom addition to the elementary that will cost $1.5 million and increase by 2 classrooms and a computer lab. The football stadium needs renovations and will cost $400,000. And then finally, you want a technology bond of $700,000 that will take the school to 1-to-1 and this will pay for infrastructure upgrades and all necessary training in addition to the actual technology. So these are the 5 things you're going to do through passing bonds. So what I want you to do is answer these 6 items in a spreadsheet. And I would encourage you to use Excel spreadsheet here to do this. You're going to do this for each school. So you will take the total value of the ad valorem over 10 years. Keep in mind what we said. There's a 4% growth each year. The total bonding capacity, which will be 10% of that ad valorem. The amount needed for the bonds by bond each year, and I'm going to show you an example of what I'm talking about. The amount of money needed for interest on the bonds, and we looked in the video on how you can determine interest. How many mills are required for the sinking fund, and then finally the cost to the homeowner with that $100,000 home on a yearly and monthly basis. Finally, you're going to create a simple presentation giving an explanation of your plans in lay terms so that the most simple, so that the non-educator person will be able to understand what you intend to do. All right, so let us look then at what I mean here when I say break this up. So let's show you here. So I said these are the 6 items you need to do, a total ad valorem. So in this district, I think that's 10 million. Nope, that's only $1 million. So I just did this sheet here in Excel, and you can see that I put in $10 million here for my district. So my bonding capacity is 10%. I had a 4% growth the second year, so my bonding capacity has gone up. So I can see what I've done. So what I want you to do here is we're going to do some different buses. So we're going to do a bus here of $250,000. But keep in mind that we're not going to do this 1 year. We're going to do it 3 years. So I need to pull this down for 3 years. Because what I've done is I've taken my bonding capacity out over that 3-year period. So my bonding capacity is up to $1 million. Well, I've only bonded $250,000 thanks to this. So let's see, this says a technology bond of $700,000. Well, let's say where I have here phase 1, let's say this is my technology bond. And I want a $700,000 bond, and I want to do this for 5 years. Okay, notice that my bonding capacity here is $1 million. If I do this for 5 years, I do technology in 1 bus, then I have almost met my bonding capacity the first 2 years in existence. So I cannot add, a classroom of $1.5 million, or probably even the stadium. In this district, yeah, I've exceeded my bonding capacity, so I can't do that. So you're going to have to play around with it and figure out how to make things work. And if it doesn't all work, then you're going to have to decide what you want and justify your decisions of what you're doing. So keep in mind what I said, 2 different transportation bonds, building a new building for 10 additional classrooms or renovating an old building, building additions onto your elementary for 2 classrooms and a computer lab, football stadium repairs, and then finally a technology bond going for a 1-to-1 atmosphere. But you can see how this first column then does what I asked you to do. The interest on this bond, $250,000 bond, my interest is at 3% here, so I've quickly figured it's $22,500. My yearly interest on this one is $7,500. My technology bond, again, just playing around. My interest on a $700,000 bond at 3% for 5 years is going to be $105,000. That's a total of $21,000 each year. So this is how I organize it. You can organize it any way you want. I will help you, but I want you to work with this on your own without me giving you more ideas than this. This is a pretty good start, okay? So with that, I'm going to let you be. Good luck. If you have any questions, feel free to email, text, call, or come by the office.